It's a new Kirblog, and it's on Ultraman, but I don't know anything about this series, but I just watched it streaming on Netflix, and I kinda liked it, so here are my thoughts. So I had a whole bunch of other anime I wanted to cover this year for Animepril, some of which included guests, none of which I've been able to secure in the middle of everything. So as this is actually kind of a backup, for those of you who don't know, just this past week on April 1st of all things, and it was no joke, Netflix put up a CG Ultraman series just kind of out of nowhere, and I heard about it and thought, oh, I'm actually kind of interested in checking this out. So I basically binged it in about 3 days. It was 13 episodes, so it was quite simple to do. And figured, hey, you know what? I've never really done this before for Animepril, where I've gone through, I guess like a very, very fresh new anime, well, and in its entirety as well, which is nice. Kind of hot off the presses as it's just come out. So I figured, hey, you know what? Why not? This might be interesting to try. I usually just do this with movies, and I thought I would give this a shot with this series. I guess backstory on my history with Ultraman. There is not much, sad to say. My only real having seen any Ultraman stuff at all was back on, I think it was when it was still the Fox box before it was 4Kids TV. On Saturday morning, 4Kids licensed, I believe it was Ultraman Tiga, and I caught very minor bits of a couple episodes of that, and even further, I kind of more remember just on some of the DVDs. Oh yeah, the very short-lived run of uncut DVDs that 4Kids produced for Yu-Gi-Oh! And Shaman King. They had commercials for the Ultraman Tiga DVD releases, which also actually had subtitles to them, to my surprise. But yeah, that's really all I knew. And of course, I knew it was like an old school tokusatsu, live action series, very Super Sentai-esque. I don't know which one predicted which. I don't pretend to know these things. Other friends of mine know a lot more about tokusatsu stuff than me. Sadly, I think as a kid, I probably also confused the likes of Kamen Rider for Ultraman at some point. Although I might have possibly had an Ultraman figure of some kind, but I wish I'm sure it's buried somewhere for the life of God back in Long Island somewhere, probably at Dad's house, at Dadifer's house. But all the same, yeah. So Ultraman for Netflix. I guess also kind of interestingly, part of the reason why I decided to check this one out was also because of the dub cast. I saw that it was announced a little while ago, and saw that it was a dub at Studiopolis, where of course I did my work on Sailor Moon and Terraform Mars and Boruto, and we're doing Osamatsu there right now. And so it had a whole bunch of very talented folks, friends of mine, Ben and Lucian Dodge, Robbie Damon, Cassandra Morris, Tara Sands, and also had some interesting guests, had some lovely folks I've not heard in anime for a very long time, Liam O'Brien, Fred Tatasciore, Steve Bloom even, and then also Gunnar Sizemore, who I'd heard in some Cartoon Network shows and things, and Josh Hutcherson from Hunger Games. I was like, oh wow, they're like, between this and the new Baki series, which I've not seen, but that was another Studiopolis Netflix series dub. They're really like, bringing out the big guns for a lot of these shows, which I was extremely impressed by. So I was like, okay, I want to check this out. And I've been really, between the Godzilla series that I worked on and also even the new Mewtwo movie coming up, I've just been really impressed by how far CG 3D animated anime series have kind of come in recent years. So just the visuals of this one too, I was like, okay, I'm down for this. And so yeah, getting into it. I guess it was a little half and half on this show. I enjoyed it. I binged through, I think, about like 9 or 10 episodes in the first day, and then finished up the last couple in the following few days. So I liked it enough that I was kind of hooked on it and everything. It was kind of like much like what I said about the Power Rangers reboot movie that happened a year or two ago now. God, it's already been that long. I felt like it was kind of the sort of adult Power Rangers-esque show that as a kid I always hoped, oh, maybe someday we'll get that, but didn't know if they would ever go out of their way to do something like it. And it certainly it scratched that itch in that kind of way. I certainly wouldn't say it's one-to-one the way a traditional tokusatsu show would go with the, like, didn't have actually very many monsters of the week or, monsters of the episode, I guess you could say. There were certainly a few enemies like that kind of interspersed, but it wasn't so formulaic in that sense. I would say what it shared in common is that it was pretty straightforward and like simplistic as far as just like a city's in peril and there's aliens attacking and this is the superhero that goes to try and stop them, and you kind of just get a moment in their lives from day to day or whatever. But in that it was mature in the fact that it was like, bearing in mind and acknowledging the harsher realities of like and the struggles that someone would realistically go through in a situation like this, with Shinjiro as the protagonist. Sad to say, Shinjiro was a perfectly like serviceable protagonist, not necessarily very interesting. It was actually more so kind of the things happening all around him that were kind of keeping me going with the story, and not so much like wanting to see where he was going as a character. Like, he's certainly identifiable, but I think unfortunately he was kind of the biggest sign of the show's overall weakness, in that, like, in its simplicity, which is fine, it landed very generically. There wasn't too much that they did with them that was all that interesting. And yeah, it's sad to say, like, virtually all of the characters that were surrounding him and his immediate, kind of things going on in his life, even his father, who was, this is in the very first episode, is the original Ultraman that came before him, and he's inherited the kind of alienatic strength that he got from Ultraman, I guess, bonding with him. It's not entirely clear. I'm sure people that know the lore better would know. And actually, I will say, going into this not knowing virtually anything about Ultraman didn't impede me from enjoying it for what it was, because it was set up in a way that, like, it's perfectly just, you could just watch it and it's fine. And then there's a couple other characters that are, without getting too much into spoiler territory, that are other superhero characters in the same kind of vein, and kind of go about their lives sort of differently as far as the moral and execution of what they do on a day-to-day basis kind of thing. But they both have their own spin on the Ultraman sort of power and name to it. Even and actually this was a nice surprise, was the female lead, which at first I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. Who is she's an idol, like a pop idol. Turned out to actually be kind of an intriguing character. They had the everybody's related to each other Star Wars trope thing, where her dad turns out to be another character that has some kind of not super important fixture in the world, but like is related to the other things going on, and kind of her whole relation to what Ultraman is doing and everything, and the fact that, like, she has a little bit more complication to, like, how she feels about everything going on around her, and everything involving Ultraman, and you see, like, kind of how she develops in tandem with Shinjiro, which was kind of a nice surprise. Some of my favorite moments, like there in the whole show, actually were as a result of her development with Shinjiro. And they didn't, go too far into like, it's like a romantic thing or whatever. It's more of just like, this is a person that I happen to be interacting with. We're both sort of, public figures that are well known for different reasons, by the public, and kind of how we deal with the terrors that are happening, in the place that we live, with these monsters and aliens and things attacking and all that. That I found to be pretty cool. I guess this is going slightly into spoiler territory, but just because the character isn't introduced until about halfway through the show. But Seiji, who is this young boy character, I think he's like a freshman, and Shinjiro is maybe a senior in their high school, something like that. Seiji is this young kid character who basically wants to be kind of his own version of Ultraman, and kind of makes like a makeshift version of the suit. I mean, not makeshift because it's very serviceable, but like it was unfortunate because while we have Shinjiro and also Moroboshi, who's one of the other partners that he works with on his missions and everything, Seiji kind of ended up being the more interesting character of the three of them as far as the mains go. And they executed everything fine as far as like how all of the characters related to each other, but part of me was like, I almost wish that the show was about this kid as opposed to Shinjiro in the end, which is kind of harsh to say, but So yeah, sad to say, story and characters were kind of so-so, serviceable, and a couple interesting ones kind of mixed in there, but for the most part, nothing like massively outstanding, I would say. But what it definitely made up for in that department was both visuals and audibles. On the audio side, really good, like big orchestral, big booming, awesome kind of soundtrack to it, particularly the main like Ultraman hero theme, which I was doing my little lyrical thing to in the beginning, in the intro thing. Definitely that. And voice performances all really solid. They had some fantastic voice actors and at least in the dub cast. I'm not sure of the Japanese cast, but great production on that. Of course, Studiopolis always does some of the best stuff. I think it actually was also. I actually shot him an email to say, hey, great job on this. I believe this is the first new anime that Jeff Nimoy of Digimon fame has directed in a while. I believe so. But and he did a great job, and the whole cast was really, really awesome. And then as far as the visuals go, I mean, it's funny because people, well, not funny, but people seem to be still kind of divisive on how they feel about CG anime. I think that by this point they've kind of got how to do it in a way that looks really appealing in my mind anyway. And I actually think that for this show in particular, stylistically and creatively, it makes sense for it to be CG because it's stylized enough that it certainly has like its own cool sort of flair to it. It's not like hyper realistic necessarily, but especially when they're in these suits and they're fighting against the alien characters and everything, I think it gives the kind of sensation as if like you could sort of pretend that it is live action. You can kind of stop and think of that a little bit, but they're like pushing a limit because since they're not limited to I guess the standard kind of way that live action tokusatsu shows would be. Although I have no idea what like modern day Power Ranger shows and Sentai things look like compared to back in the 90s and way earlier than that even. I have no clue. But yeah, I mean, allowing the characters to like fly around and do all these crazy dynamic camera angles, and the biggest thing of all definitely is the fight scenes. Whether it's just like the more kind of humanized stuff, or the fighting, the martial arts choreography is just stunning and very like it's just super well paced and like really intense, and all the hits feel very like nice and chunky and powerful and everything. And then the kind of alien battles, nothing giant, no like big kaiju, sort of Power Ranger type battle, not Power Ranger, you know what I mean? The giant battles in like in the middle of Tokyo or whatever. None of that, surprisingly, but the actual fights against the alien sort of monster of the week type villain characters and everything, and all of their powers are really cool, and just the way that everything, all the explosions and all that. A lot of like almost Michael Bay-esque sort of junk food kind of thing to that, but except you can actually tell what the hell is going on, so not a good comparison. Please excuse me for that. Sorry. No offense, Michael Bay. Some offense, Michael Bay. You whatever. He's not going to hear this. Maybe Ray Chase hears this. Ray Chase, you were great in your like 2 episodes you were in. He's not going to hear this. If he hears this, I'm going to laugh my ass off. Anyway, so I enjoyed it. Went in as a completely blind, Ultraman newbie, and had a good time with it. I don't know if they plan on doing further seasons of it, but I would certainly be willing to check out more of them. And I'm actually curious because I know I have friends that are bigger into tokusatsu and stuff, especially like Kamen Rider type stuff and Power Rangers and everything. I don't know if I know any big Ultraman fans, but I am also curious, especially if there are people in the comments that are big Ultraman people and have followed the series and whatever legal means, hopefully. I don't know like how much actual like presence he has out here as far as accessibility and watching various shows, or I don't even know like however many other shows there were. Also, one other little silly stupid side thing is so Motoboshi, another mild spoiler here, Motoboshi, one of the other characters played by Liam O'Brien, turns out to be he's kind of an alternative Ultraman, and he has Model 7, which is Ultraman 7, which I suppose is from some other pre-existing Ultraman series of some kind, but of course I mainly know it from URUTORAMAN 7, the Okusenman music video thing from Nico Nico Doga. That whole, you look it up, you know what it is. But that made me chuckle just to see like that kind of come up like in an unexpected place. But perhaps it should have been an expected place because I didn't even put 2 and 2 together on that. But there you go. Anyway, that's it. Just a quick one. Just wanted to go over my thoughts and opinions on that. So, yeah, Ultraman on Netflix. Check it out if you're curious. It's pretty good. And I don't know what the next one will be. Maybe one of my guests will work it out, and I'll get them after all. I have no idea at this point. But, yeah, thanks for listening. I'll at least have a couple more anime to cover over this following Animepril. Oh, actually, real quick, if you made it to the end of this, couple little minor announcements. If I'm right, then tomorrow, Sunday evening, I believe, and I'll have like a specific time. I'll announce it on Twitter and everything. But I'm going to be appearing on the Animation Success Stories podcast with my friend Brian Newton, who works on Rick and Morty. He invited me on very graciously to talk about some of my experiences with animation and producing my own stuff and everything. So look forward to that. I'll have a link to where it'll be streaming online, and it'll also be posted up separately. And also on Monday, don't forget that, yes, on Monday, April 15th at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time will be the deadline for the Tome RPG fan art contest. So in case you guys haven't heard about that and maybe you still want to enter, I'll have a link to the update video where we went over all the rules and everything at the end card here, so you can refresh yourself on that. And you only got a couple days left in case you haven't entered yet and you want to get your character into a video game. So yeah, looking forward to reviewing all those with the judges and everything, and it's going to be fun. So yeah, look forward to whatever next anime will be reviewed in the following weekend, and I'll catch you all very soon. Have a good one. Bye.